On November 15, 1963, the President of the United States came to New York City to address the 5th Constitutional Convention of the AFL-CIO. It was by no means the first time John F. Kennedy had been among us. He came as an old friend. He was, as he had often said, no stranger to trade union meetings. We had known him well during his service in the House and Senate. He worked with us and we worked with him on many legislative proposals for the benefit of the nation. And when the time came, we enthusiastically supported him for the presidency. It is difficult even now to realize that 1 week later, almost to the hour, John F. Kennedy would be shot dead by an assassin on the streets of Dallas, Texas, in the most terrible crime of our generation. No one in the convention dreamed that John F. Kennedy was speaking his last words to labor. We in the AFL-CIO believe these last words, this historic occasion, should be part of the record of our time. Fortunately, we had arranged to have the proceedings of the convention filmed. It is that address on that happy occasion which you will now see. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
The Executive Council, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen. The other day I read in a newspaper where Senator Goldwater asked for labor's support before 2,000 cheering Illinois businessmen. I'm glad to come to this convention, and I think that the AFL-CIO at this convention and looking back over the years, over this century, can take pride in the actions it has taken, pride in the stands it has made, pride in the things it's done not only for the American labor movement, but for the United States as a whole. In the last 3 years abroad, we have doubled the number of nuclear weapons in our strategic alert forces. In the last 3 years, we've increased by 45% the number of combat-ready Army divisions. We've increased by 600% the number of our counterinsurgency forces. The United States is stronger today than ever before in our history. And with that strength, we work for peace. And here in the United States, we've encouraged the peaceful desegregation of schools in 238 districts, theaters in 144 cities, restaurants in 129 cities, and lunch counters in 100 cities. We have boosted the purchasing power and relieved the distress of some of those least able to take care of themselves by increasing the minimum wage to $1.25, which is still much too low. And expanding its coverage by 3.5 million, which is still too little. By increasing Social Security benefits to men and women who can retire at the age of 62. By granting for the first time in the history of the United States public assistance to several 100,000 children of unemployed fathers, and by extending the benefits of nearly 3 million jobless workers. By doing these things and others, we have attempted to work for the benefit of our people. And I can assure you that if we can obtain, and I see no good reason why we should not, if we can obtain the prompt passage of the pending $11 billion tax reduction bill, we will be sailing by next April on the winds of the longest and strongest peacetime expansion in the history of the United States.
On November the 16th, 1963, Air Force One touched down at the Cape Skid Strip, bringing President Kennedy on his third visit to America's spaceport. He was welcomed by Major General Leighton I. Davis, commander of the Air Force Missile Test Center, NASA Administrator James Webb, and NASA Launch Operations Center Director Kurt Debus. The president moved out quickly on his whirlwind tour, stopping outside the Saturn Blockhouse on Complex 37 for a Project Gemini briefing by Air Force astronauts Cooper and Grissom. After another briefing inside the Blockhouse on Project Apollo, the president and his party, which included Florida's Senator Smathers, drove to the base of the giant Saturn. Saturn will carry an American crew to the moon in this decade, a goal established by the young president shortly after he took office in 1961. The commander-in-chief was piped aboard. Donning a sailor's jacket, he looked every inch the naval officer he was during World War II. The fleet performed flawlessly, and President Kennedy saw his first Cape missile launch, a Polaris, from the submerged nuclear submarine, the Andrew Jackson. A proud commander congratulated a proud crew. The president returned to the Cape by helicopter. His visit expressed his continuing support for the nation's space program. President Kennedy bids his farewell.
President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. He made a trip to one of his favorite places, Palm Beach.
And today our Terry Parker retraced the president's steps. She's live in the newsroom. Terry?
Well, all of the places the president visited that last weekend are still there, and everyone who is in Palm Beach will never forget that he did once call Palm Beach his second home.
50 years ago today, President John F. Kennedy flew into Palm Beach International Airport, going to the Kennedy family compound on North County Road. It was a favorite spot for all of the Kennedys, who often ended up a few miles south at Green's Pharmacy.
The whole Kennedy clan used to patronize the store whenever they were in town. And today, people will come in, well, do you know which seat he sat in?
Not only did the Kennedys frequent local establishments, they usually attended Mass at St. Edward's Catholic Church. This plaque reads, President John F. Kennedy knelt here at Mass. And after church, back across the street to Green's.
He would come in for anything and everything, and they would come and they would have burgers and fries after church.
But that weekend, the president went to St. Anne's Catholic Church on Olive Avenue in West Palm Beach. If you look closely, you can see the peephole into the rectory, drilled there by the Secret Service to keep an eye on the president. In the vestibule hangs this picture of Kennedy leaving Mass that Sunday, his last Mass. After church, he told party officials his big announcement. He was going to make Palm Beach his Democratic re-election headquarters. On the last Sunday of his life, President Kennedy spent the afternoon relaxing here at the Palm Beach compound. He watched a football game and then a private screening of the movie Tom Jones, and then he left Palm Beach for the very last time. Kennedy followed his motorcade back to the airport. Photographer Bob Davidoff snapped this shot, the last time Kennedy was in Palm Beach, on his way to Texas. Davidoff says as Kennedy waved goodbye, he told him, "I'll see you in a few weeks."
Monday, November 18th, 1963. The presidential plane arrives at Tampa, Florida. President Kennedy will make 3 speeches in Tampa. His major address delivered to the 47th annual meeting of the Florida State Chamber of Commerce. During this one day, President Kennedy makes 5 speeches in Tampa, Miami, and Miami Beach. At Lopez Field in Tampa, The President participates in ceremonies honoring the 50th anniversary of a flight from Tampa to St. Petersburg, remarking that even though the venture went bankrupt, it contributed to the progress that made this country #1 in aviation.
What we are attempting to do in the United States in 1963, both at home and abroad, is relatively simple. And that is to maintain the peace, to maintain the vital interests of the United States, to maintain the economy of the United States moving ahead fast enough to absorb the millions of people who are coming into the labor market every year. I know as you sit here in this city and in Florida that you must sometimes wonder what our policies are. I think their execution is difficult, but what we're trying to do is simple. It is on the Alliance for Progress that we base our common hope for the future. That hope is for a hemisphere where every man has enough to eat and a chance to work, where every child can learn and every family can find decent shelter. It is for a hemisphere where every man, from the American Negro to the Indian of the Altiplano, can be liberated from the bonds of social injustice, free to pursue his talents as far as they will take him.
Ybor City, West Tampa, all the civic clubs who would like to present you this humidor full of cigars. Also from the Tampa Cigar Industry and the Cigar Festival Association. And my daughter Marlene would like to make a presentation for you.
President Kennedy, this star is for your daughter Caroline.
President John F. Kennedy departed Washington on Thursday morning, November 21st, 1963. President Kennedy went to Texas to take his program to the people. He had carried the state by only a narrow margin in the 1960 election. There was dissension there over his strong civil rights program. Ultra-conservative elements were critical, bitterly so, of the administration's foreign policy. And yet, the crowds that greeted the President and Mrs. Kennedy were friendly, enthusiastic.
More than 3 years, I've spoken about the new frontier. This is not a partisan term, and it's not the exclusive property of Republicans or Democrats. It refers instead to this nation's place in history, to the fact that we do stand on the edge of a great new era, filled with both crisis and opportunity, an era to be characterized by achievement and by challenge. It is an area which calls for action and for the best efforts of all those who would test the unknown and the uncertain in every phase of human endeavor. It is a time for pathfinders and pioneers.
Thursday evening, the Houston Coliseum. A testimonial dinner for Congressman Albert Thomas.
In Texas and the nation, change has been the law of life. Growth has meant new opportunities for this state. Progress has meant new achievements. And we dare not look back now. In 1990, the age of space will be entering its second phase. And our hopes in it to preserve the peace, to make sure that in this great new sea, as on earth, the United States is second to none. Your old men shall dream dreams. Your young men shall see visions, the Bible tells us. And where there is no vision, the people perish.
Friday morning, November 22nd. It's 8:45 and the weather is misty. The Vice President and Texas Governor John Conley applaud President Kennedy's entrance as he returns to his hotel for a breakfast with the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce. The breakfast party awaits the arrival of Mrs. Kennedy. Mrs. Kennedy's entrance draws another comment from the President.
2 years ago, I said that, introduced myself in Paris by saying that I was the man who had accompanied Mrs. Kennedy to Paris. I'm getting somewhat that same sensation as I travel around Texas. Nobody wonders what Lyndon and I wear. I'm confident, as I look to the future, that our chances for security, our chances for peace, are better than they've been in the past. And the reason is because we're stronger. And with that strength is a determination to not only maintain the peace, but also the vital interests of the United States.
Friday morning, 11 o'clock. The presidential jet leaves Fort Worth with a short flight to Dallas, where the President has a scheduled luncheon address. Several thousand enthusiastic Texans are on hand to give the President and Mrs. Kennedy a warm welcome.